So in the coffee industry, there has been what is called the three waves: the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave. So the first wave began in the 1800s when coffee became a commodity. Everybody was drinking coffee, but they didn't care much about how the coffee was roasted or how the coffee was brewed. In the 1970s, that is when the second wave happened. This is when Starbucks came along, and all of a sudden, people realized that coffee is more of a specialty product than just a commodity. And people became more familiar with specialty coffee drinks, for example, lattes, cappuccinos, and all of those. And then today, we have the third wave of coffee. This began in the year 2000, where the coffee roasters are more particular about the way they roast coffee. The coffee consumers are more particular about the origin of the coffee. They want to know more about the coffee, how the coffee was grown, who grew the coffee, and whether the people who grew the coffee are being taken care of. And also, people are starting to enjoy coffee in a different way with the brewing processes. There's quite a few ways to brew coffee. Personally, I drink coffee. I like black coffee. I drink coffee black all the time. I grind my own beans every day, and I use a French press, and I love my coffee. So today, my presentation is going to be covering a particular topic that is known as anaerobic coffee processing or anaerobic coffee fermentation. The term anaerobic means the removal of oxygen, and is a very big part of the discussion we're going to be having today. This new process causes a major change in the flavor of the coffee that most people have never experienced before, and this is going to be a game changer in the industry of coffee. So it's not something new. This is already happening across the world in different coffee growing countries. For example, Ethiopia, Colombia is also another good example. And things are already happening where coffee growers are using this process, and they're creating amazing flavors from this anaerobic coffee fermentation, and they're getting paid top dollars for it because it's such a big difference in taste. Before I begin my presentation, I'll have to tell you a little bit about myself. And before I do that, I'll have to tell you about where I'm from. I'm from the beautiful land of Kenya. That is my country of origin. I came to the US years ago, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about Kenya. So Kenya is a very beautiful country on the east coast of Africa. It is in a very interesting geographical location. It's right on the equator. We are right next to Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Uganda. And we are famous for very high elevation. We have three high elevation areas: Mount Elgon, Mount Kenya, and the Abadia mountain range. And the soil is very rich with minerals from the volcanic ash. And that right there is a secret sauce. It's a game changer for coffee in Kenya. Kenya is known to have some of the best tasting coffees in the world. We are also famous for quite a few things. For example, safaris. People come all day from different parts of the world to see different animals in Kenya. For example, lions, zebras, giraffes, rhinos, leopards, you name it, we have it in Kenya. We are very famous for that. We are also famous for long distance running. A lot of people in Kenya live in very high elevation, and because of that, there's less oxygen when you go up, so their lungs are used to less oxygen, and that's why we have some of the best runners in the world. And when they come to Boston or Chicago or New York for the marathon, it's a piece of cake for them. In fact, just about a month ago, we crashed the Boston Marathon in both male and female categories. So a little bit about myself. My name is Martin Kabaki, and I've been in the coffee industry for quite a few years. It's a very big passion of mine. I came from Kenya to the US in search of better opportunities, and my first job in the US was working for a coffee shop. I worked for a Panera Bread, a coffee shop in Jacksonville, many years ago. Panera Bread is a big chain of coffee shops, and they have over 2,000 coffee locations in the US, and I'm sure most of you have been to a Panera Bread. I started as a dishwasher. I was washing dishes at Panera Bread, and I noticed how Americans love coffee. They line up for coffee, and they are willing to pay an extra amount of money for a good cup of coffee. And that is when it hit me that I'm from Kenya, Americans love coffee, and I saw a big opportunity, and I started learning everything I could about coffee. I started selling coffee beans that are not roasted yet. They are called green coffee beans. I would bring green coffee beans from Kenya, and I would sell them to coffee roasters. I went to many different trade shows, coffee trade shows across the US, and I quickly learned that the best way to do this is to have my own brand of coffee, which I was able to do. I have sold premium quality Kenyan coffee to some of the biggest supermarkets in the US. Today, we're going to be covering something else that I'm working on that I think is going to be interesting, and it's going to be quite a game changer in the coffee industry. And it's called Javabooch. I do have 3 websites. My main website is Cafe Nairobi, which is the regular Kenyan coffee. That is my brand of coffee. I named after our capital city of Nairobi, of course. And my second website is javabooch.com, which is the one we're going to be talking about today, about this amazing new coffee. And then the third website is martinkabaki.com, which is my website. I do personal branding for coffee. I like to help people create their own brands of coffee from scratch. I help them from sourcing the coffee from Kenya, bring it to the US, which is quite a process. I help them create different roast profiles for their coffee. I help them build a nice website to sell their coffee. And also I help them with fulfillment. So that is martinkabaki.com, and you can check it out. I would love to start my presentation today with 2 stories about 2 different animals in 2 different countries. And these are true stories. So the first story is about how coffee was discovered. So coffee was discovered hundreds of years ago. This guy was up in the mountains in Ethiopia. And what happened is he noticed that some of his goats were getting very excited, very happy after eating some berries from a certain bush. He's never seen that before. They were just too happy. And he got interested. He got very curious. And he decided to take some of the cherries that these goats were getting happy from, and he took some of them home, and he cooked them, and he ate them. And guess what happened? He got a buzz. And since then, coffee has been a big, big thing. The second story, most of you maybe have heard about this story. If you watch the movie Bucket List by Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, which are 2 of my favorite actors. Morgan Freeman talks about this particular coffee that is very rich, very smooth, but also very expensive. And the reason is because, according to the movie, which is also a true story, is because this animal is not a monkey, it's not a cat. It looks like a cat. It's a tree cat, I would say. It has a bushy tail. It lives in the jungles of Asia, and particularly in the country of Indonesia. And this animal is called civet. The civet loves to eat ripe coffee cherries, which are red in color. When coffee is growing on a farm, the berries change from green to red. That means the coffee is ready for harvesting or it's ready for picking. So this civet animal picks on the red cherry beans, it eats them, and then what happens is when the cherries, when the coffee beans go through the digestive tract of the civet, it interacts with different enzymes during the process. After the coffee comes out, and after the coffee has been roasted, the flavor of the coffee has changed and it's amazing. It's very different, very rich, very smooth, and it's very expensive, by the way. So that is also a true story, and it's going to be a big part of the conversation we're going to be having today. So coffee processing takes quite a few steps. Most people know about how coffee is grown, how coffee is harvested, and how coffee is brewed. But a lot of people are not familiar with one step that is part of the process, that is a very important step in my opinion, and that is going to bring the next 4th wave of coffee, because there's certain things that we're doing in that space that are very interesting, that is causing a very big change in the dynamics of coffee. So the first step in coffee is cultivation or growing of the coffee. And then the second step is harvesting, where the coffee is harvested when the cherries change from green to red and they're ready for picking. Remember that each cherry has 2 beans in it. Now, for you to be able to roast these beans, you have to get the beans out of the cherry. And the only way to do this is fermentation. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. And the other steps are roasting the coffee. The coffee has to be roasted, and then the coffee also has to be brewed before people can enjoy it. So let's talk about the fermentation process. For hundreds and hundreds of years, and including today, coffee is still fermented in open-air tanks. Most of them are located near or at the coffee farms. Here is a picture of one of them. It's an open-air tank, and that is how coffee is fermented, so that we can get the beans from the red berries. Now, for the coffee to go through this process, it has to be in these tanks, but the only challenge with this is that during the fermentation process, remember fermentation is a process where there's a lot of microbial activity involved, where bacteria and yeast are interacting with the sugars or are digesting or feasting on the sugars of the coffee cherry so that we can get the beans. So when this happens, many things can affect the process, because remember, these open-air tanks are outside in the open. They are exposed to the elements. Maybe sometimes there's too much rain, sometimes there's too much sunlight, sometimes there's many other bacteria that are not necessary, and they also become part of the process, which is not good. And then there's so many things, and a lot of things could happen because it's not a controlled environment. So that is what we're trying to change. And this is the new thing. I like to call it the new paradigm. This is where coffee is being fermented in a more controlled process. And the best and only way to do this is using a sealed tank or using what is called sealed tank fermentation. So it looks something like this on the image. And what happens here, for us to achieve the best possible results is, number one, to remove the oxygen. The oxygen has to be removed. And the reason for this is because certain communities of bacteria and yeast or microbes, they don't survive in areas that don't have oxygen in them. So because of this process, we get a whole different set of communities, a whole different set of microbes, which is bacteria and yeast, that are going to be working on the sugars. They're going to be digesting the sugars, and this is where the change comes from. So for us to remove the oxygen from the tanks, so that the microbial activity can happen, we use a CO2 to flush out the oxygen because CO2 is more dense than oxygen, and it helps to push the oxygen out of the tank. Now, because we have a tank, we're able to control quite a few processes here. And because of that, we're able to get repeatable results or the same results since the process is almost the same, as opposed to open air fermentation tanks. Here is a good example of a closed fermentation tank or sealed fermentation tank. And this is the game-changing thing that is happening with coffee. This is going to be a big thing. There's no oxygen in this tank, and because of this, the microbial community is very different. There's certain bacteria that are working on the coffee or the coffee cherry that just do an amazing job. And because of that activity, there's so many different flavors that are being developed in the coffee that have never been tested before. Now, one thing that happens with this kind of coffee is that it raises the premiumness of the coffee to over 30%. The coffee that has been fermented this way obviously takes more effort to produce, and it's sold for more money, which is good for the growers. The other thing is the sensory taste. This coffee tastes way better. The aroma is different, by the way. The taste is way different. I would describe the taste as very intense tropical fruit flavor. It's amazing, by the way. You should try it. And then the texture of the coffee is also different. The mouthfeel is different. It's very syrupy, I would say. It's very creamy, almost like a yogurt. It's very different, and people are going to enjoy it. The other thing is the acidity in the coffee, which is also part of this conversation. And the reason is because a lot of people don't drink coffee or don't like to drink coffee because they say it's too acidic, it doesn't upset their stomach, or they get acid reflux or something like that from the coffee. This coffee is different. Because of the prolonged fermentation process without oxygen, the acidity level is different. The acid is still there, yes, but it's different. It's more complex. I would say it's more rounder, it's smoother, and it's not harsh on your tongue or your tummy. And people are going to enjoy this. Even people who don't like coffee, they're going to enjoy this coffee because acidity is very different compared to normal coffee. I like to make a disclaimer here by saying that we are not selling any probiotic benefits with this coffee. That is not the selling point. The selling point with this coffee is the flavor. The flavor stays even after the roasting process. The reason that we're not claiming any probiotic benefits or any live cultures in this coffee is because before coffee can be enjoyed as a drink, it has to be brewed, it has to be roasted. And during the roasting process, the coffee has to be roasted at about 195 degrees Celsius and above. And because of that heat process, there's no microbes or there's no probiotics or live cultures that can survive in that heat. However, the taste, the amazing taste from the fermentation process is carried over even after the roasting process. So that is what is going to be a game changer as far as this coffee. I'm very proud to say that I came up with the name Javabooch. And the reason I came up with this is because I'm a very big fan of branding. I like companies with amazing branding stories, beautiful logos, and brand messaging. And one of my inspiring examples is FedEx. FedEx full name used to be Federal Express, and I love the way they took the word FedEx and Express, and they took the FED and the EX and made it a word. Combined it together, I made it a word as FedEx. Obviously the E is capital letter, which is great. And it's so easy to say. It's beautiful branding. It's very memorable. And I was trying to achieve something similar to that. So I came up with the inspiration of the name Java. Java, everybody knows is coffee. It's a common word in the coffee circles. Java is the name of one of the islands in Indonesia, which is one of the biggest coffee growing countries in the world. And then the name Booch. Booch is an American slang for fermented drink or for kombucha. So I thought the two would be a perfect marriage. So I came with Java and Booch. and I combined them together, and that's how Javabooch came about. The name is easy to say, it's very memorable, and I'm also doing a trademark process. The trademark is pending on it with USPTO, which I have already filed. So we're gonna have 3 different products in our Javabooch company. The first product is going to be green Javabooch beans. These are green coffee beans that have not been roasted yet, but they have gone through the anaerobic coffee fermentation process. So we're gonna be selling these to specialty coffee roasters who want to sell this to people that they work with. Number 2, we're going to have Javabooch branded beans. These are beans that have been roasted under our brand name. And this is going to be available for people who like to brew their own coffee at home, and also for people to buy on the shelves of different supermarkets. And then number 3, and what I'm most excited about, is Javabooch Ltd. This is ready to drink Javabooch in a can. I think it would be important to mention here that Javabooch Ltd is a first of its kind. We are the first company in the world to make a retail-ready, ready-to-drink coffee that has been made from the anaerobic fermentation process. We're going to have quite a few flavors so that everybody can try them. One thing that brings a lot of excitement and joy to me about this project is the fact that the coffee growers have more say. They are part of the narrative. The reason is because for coffee to go through this process, the anaerobic coffee fermentation process, the coffee farmer has to be involved. The reason is because the coffee cherries are only available at the farm level, and that is the best way to do the fermentation process because we cannot bring them over, they'll be very bulky. So I'm very excited to know that the coffee farmers are going to get more revenues from this process because obviously they are putting more effort, they are putting extra work, they have to invest in different types of equipment to do this process. And one thing I'm very proud of is that at Javabooch, we don't look at coffee suppliers or coffee growers as just a part of our supply chain. They are more than that to us. We like to call them our specialty partners. So there's quite a few barriers to entry to this process. It takes a lot of time, number one. It's a very delicate process. There's something that is called under fermentation or even over fermentation in coffee. And this is not good because it can create very funky flavors. For example, it can create vinegar-like or sour notes to the coffee, which would not be good at all. So we have to teach the coffee growers back at the origin level or the farm level on the best ways to achieve the best results. And we also help working with coffee farmers to help them access different equipment so that they can be able to do this process. So these are the different flavors. This is what I'm excited about. This is Javabooch ready to drink. It's going to be available in 6 different flavors. And my goal is to put this into every supermarket in the US so that people can enjoy this drink. And it's going to come in different flavors. It's going to come in different, we're going to have different creamers available. We have the original black, which is just plain coffee, which is my favorite. We're also going to have flavors that have milk in them or dairy-based cream. And we're also going to have other flavors that have plant-based creamers so that everybody can have their taste. Our distribution strategy is very simple. My goal is to get Javabooch into as many supermarkets as possible, which I've done before. I've sold my own brand of Kenyan coffee to some of the biggest supermarkets in the US, and I plan to do the same with Javabooch. And we also plan to work with different coffee shops, especially specialty coffee shops around the US, so that they can have a different selection for their coffee customers at the coffee shop level. We also plan to have Javabooch available in e-commerce platforms so that everybody can get a taste of this. When people think about fermented coffee, I want the first thing that comes to their mind to be Javabooch. There's quite a few drinks. I've been watching the beverage space in the US very closely for the last 10 years or so. And one of my biggest inspiration stories is about 2 guys who came from New York. They went to Brazil on a surfing trip. And during their surfing trip in Brazil, they came to know about coconut water. It was very refreshing, and they loved it so much, and they kept wondering why it's not available in the US. So when they came back to the US, their goal was to make sure that they bring coconut water into the US marketplace. And that is exactly what they did. And today, their brand, Vita Coco, is one of the biggest coconut water brands out there. They're in pretty much every supermarket. They have an amazing distribution strategy, and they do very well. And that is very inspiring to me. And I hope to do the same thing with Javabooch. The other thing is that quite a few other beverages that have been out there that have had quite an increase or did very well in the market. So one of them is cold brew coffee. It's very famous. A lot of people know about cold brew coffee today, and it's pretty much in every supermarket. The other one, obviously, is kombucha, which is fermented tea, and it's also in every supermarket, which is great. And there's also quite a number of probiotic beverages out there, or functional beverages out there, that are in every supermarket. And we continue to see a rise in these beverages, and we are hoping to have the same thing with Javabooch. So in addition to coffee, we have quite a few ideas as well. Our main concentration, obviously, for right now is the Javabooch, the ready-to-drink, and the brand itself. But we feel very strongly that we can bring other products in our innovation pipeline. For example, there's a process that is already being used in the coffee circles. This process is called carbonic maceration. It is heavily borrowed from the winemaking industry. And it is where you take the coffee cherries, the red coffee cherries, and you put them in the fermentation tank. But in this case, after removing the oxygen, you put a lot of CO2 or carbon dioxide in the tank, like a full concentration. And it's also game-changing as far as the flavor. It tastes very different, and you can make many other things with it. There's also something else called starter cultures, where you inoculate different cultures for yeast and bacteria into the coffee to create different flavor experiences that you want to create in the coffee, so you have more control of the process. And there's also something else called co-ferments, where you ferment the coffee cherries using other things, for example, different fruits, so they can achieve different taste in the coffee, which is also very interesting to me. And then there's also the idea of creating cocktails from this new innovation, which is the anaerobic coffee fermentation. For example, creating coffee martinis, coffee-based wines, tequila, or stuff like that. So that is very interesting to me, and it's something that we get into the future. But for right now, our biggest concentration, or our biggest thing right now, is the Javabooch brand of roasted coffee and the ready-to-drink. So we're talking to a company in Germany. This company in Germany has been building tanks for wine companies, for microbreweries, and for other companies like those, and they're very good at it. And we are in the process of trying to come up with a very specialized fermentation tank that is made by this German company purposely for anaerobic coffee processing, because it's going to make everything easier. Obviously, there's a sharp learning curve to do this process, but with this new equipment, we can be able to achieve a lot, because it comes with different things. For example, it comes with one-way degassing valve, because remember, we have to remove the oxygen from the tank, and then when the microbial activity is happening, there's also a lot of CO2 coming out, so that has to escape as well. So that is one thing. We also have to have different probes so that we can monitor everything. We want everything to be at precision level. For example, we need to monitor the pH of the coffee inside the fermentation tank. We need to measure the pressure inside the tank, and we also need to measure the sugars, how they're being broken down during the fermentation process. We need to keep track of that, and it's very important, because remember, the key goal here is to make sure that we achieve the same process every single time, so that we have the same coffee that is tasting amazing from this process. We also see another big opportunity, what I like to call fermentation camps. This is where we go to different coffee origin countries, for example, Kenya, Colombia, Ethiopia, and many others, and we work directly with the coffee growers at the farm level to show them the different ways of doing this process in the best way and to achieve the best results. This is a very delicate process. It takes time to learn, but we are willing to go out there, because we feel that this is going to be the new thing in coffee, because coffee growers all over the world can make more money by going through this additional step. And that is why we are hoping to create the fourth wave of coffee. So we are inviting everybody to get involved. We would like you to taste the coffee, because it's amazing. I've tasted the coffee like I mentioned before, and let me tell you, I love coffee, I drink coffee every day, but this is something like you've never tasted before. Everybody's gonna love it. It's the new thing in coffee. Even people who don't drink coffee, they're gonna love this new taste. We're inviting social media influencers. We have samples available. We would love for you to share our story, the Javabooch story, about this new anaerobically fermented coffee with your audience, so that everybody can know about it. We are working with the media, with reporters who want to share our story, or the Javabooch narrative about this new way of fermenting coffee. We're also looking for supermarkets and retail buyers, because Javabooch is going to be a unique addition on their shelves, something very different for their customers. And we're also looking for food distributors in the US who work with different retailers, so that they can sell this to different retailers around the US. so that people can get to know about it. We're also working with investors, people who are willing to join us in this journey so that we can bring this new coffee to the marketplace. So the taste difference, I would describe it, it's huge. At the score, there's a way that was developed by the Specialty Coffee Association to grade the taste of coffee, and it's measured from scale of 0 to 100. Some coffees have achieved 85, which is a good tasting coffee, but any coffee that has gone through this anaerobic process of coffee fermentation is scoring between 87 to 100. It's amazing. In fact, there's a coffee from Ethiopia that was fermented using this anaerobic coffee processing method, and it was tasting so good that the selling price for this coffee was $1,500 per pound, which is mind-blowing. So we're asking people to request for samples. We have them available. Please visit our website, javabooch.com, for more information. And we'd love to partner with you in any way to make this the next big thing in coffee. I'd love to share my contact information. My name is Martin Kabaki, as I mentioned. I'm the founder and CEO of Javabooch. My email is ceo@javabooch.com, and my website is javabooch.com. Thank you for your time today.